Hello again, everyone at the upper room. It's Jimmy here, and I am here to finish off finally the heart series, the teaching on the heart series. I hope you guys have been going through the last 3 teachings. I hope they've been beneficial. I hope you guys have gotten good things out of that. I haven't really heard back from anyone, which is no surprise in a lockdown. But as always, I do extend the invitation to anyone who wants to chat. Please let me know. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you for putting up with me for such a large teaching. As I mentioned last time, it is the biggest download I've ever gotten. It is very powerful. And I do want to finish it off today. And we can move on from there. So where I finished off last time, we were talking about lies, how toxic they are. And God's really, again, even though I finished that part in the last session, He has again reinforced to me how bad lies are. And one of the things He showed me was that when you believe a lie, it's not necessarily that you're missing out on the truth. It's the real bad stuff is that when you believe a lie, you're actually believing something that contradicts God's word, and it accuses God of something somehow. When your heart, I should say, believes a lie, it is also inadvertently accusing God of something wicked, something evil, and something that's entirely untrue. Okay, so believing a lie is not as harmless as we might think it is. It is actually quite toxic. Okay, in Matthew, when I think it's in chapter 8, when Jesus was talking to the centurion, He said, "As you have believed, so let it be done for you." So when you believe something truly wicked and evil, or when your heart believes something truly wicked and evil, something that accuses God, there are repercussions for that and there are consequences for it. So lies that our hearts believe, they have to be identified and dealt with. We have to get them out. Otherwise, whatever it is that our heart has believed, so it is that we are going to receive. All right, and I'm sure none of us wants that. So anyway, I just wanted to harp on that again. I just wanted to remind everyone again. So what we're doing in large part, where I last left off, we're partnering with God so that He can show us what's in our heart, so that we can repent of it and we can replace it with truth. Okay? And we went through a process largely of prayers. And just to let you know, this is not I didn't mention this last time, but this is not a process you run through in a cycle, so to speak. You don't do it one cycle at a time. When I do this, I run through this process concurrently, many times a day, with different issues and different topics, and every cycle is at a different point, depending on what I've learned, what God has shown me, and what has come up. Okay, if you go through it one at a time, it's going to take you a long time, but you can run through it concurrently many times as necessary, so you can move at a quicker rate. Now, the other thing I mentioned last time when I was talking about the last part of this teaching was that we can also talk to the heart directly, and the heart can reveal the heart itself can reveal issues to us, and we can take those issues before God. All right, and this is what today's teaching is about. And the great thing is that the heart itself will very often tell you what's wrong, what it's feeling, what it's thinking, and we can take all of that and take it to God. So it is great when God partners with us and shows us stuff, but we don't have to rely on Him for absolutely everything. We do have to partner with Him throughout this whole process, but very often it's our hearts that are going to step up straight away and reveal problems in our hearts, and we can take them to Him. All right, so partnering with God, just because we're going to deal with the heart directly, is equally important. It's still very, very important. Okay, I hope that makes sense. And the last thing I want to say before we get going is that I am going to assume that you've listened to the previous teachings about the heart, because in this one I'm just going to say a few things. I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to move forward on that assumption. So if you find something, if you hear something that's a bit odd, strange, or or even crazy, you can probably bank on the fact that I've discussed it in the past. So it's probably covered in a previous teaching. Okay, so on that note, I'm going to get started. Now, what I've spoken about many times before, you guys have probably heard it multiple times by now, is that the heart is not just an organ. It's not a simple little organ. It actually does quite a lot. It's capable of a lot. Okay, it can think, it can speak, it can reason, it can be hard, soft, open, it can be closed, blind, it can be close or far, pure, perverse, or unclean. All right, there are things in your heart that can go in your heart. There are things that can come out. You can do things with part of your heart or all of your heart. The heart has eyes. It can be slow. It can be weighed down. It can be troubled, darkened, and it can be filled with different things. You can be cut to the heart. It can rejoice. It can conceive, believe, and it can be broken. It can be dull, impenitent, deceived, comforted, foolish, led astray, and refreshed. All right, that's the part that I've very often spoke about. In a nutshell, the thing is that the heart is very much self-aware. It is aware, and the heart has its own will. All right. So when you actually tune into your heart, it responds. It responds to you, and the way it responds is different to the way you might expect. So there's a few things we need to understand a little bit better about the heart in order to recognize its response and in order to recognize when it's speaking to us and what it's telling us. And in order to do this, it does require us being sensitive to the heart. And most of us are not really sensitive to our hearts because we've never needed to be and we've never known that we need to be. But that sensitivity can be developed, and it can develop very quickly, I've discovered. So that's the good news. Now, tuning into the heart is very simple, right? I don't want to complicate it because it's not a complicated thing, but all you do is you just turn your focus and your attention inwardly on your heart, all right? In the same way you do when you want to hear from God. And you just explore how your heart really feels about things, how it... what it's saying about different things. And when things do come up, the very important point is that you do not deny anything. All right, tuning into the heart is not a difficult thing. It just takes a bit of practice and you'll pick it up quickly. The hard part about tuning into the heart is actually getting the courage to tune in. Because when you do look into your heart, you can often be confronted with harsh realities and some pretty scary stuff that's down there. All right. Very often you can be confronted, and you probably will be. You'll be confronted with bad things that have happened to you in your past, things that have been left unresolved, and that really do need to be resolved. So it can be tough, depending, of course, on what you've been through. And I can guarantee you, almost everyone has been through bad stuff. Now the thing is, when that stuff does come up, when you look into your heart and the bad stuff comes up, the very first temptation, and it's almost like a natural response, a natural instinct, is to always turn away from it, to ignore it, or to suppress it. Okay? That is instinctively how we deal with pain and with painful things. We turn away from it and we squash it, we suppress it. But as I've mentioned in the previous teachings, as difficult as it may be, when we are confronted with the painful things in our heart, we don't turn away from it. What we do instead is take it to the Lord for healing and for restoration and for truth. Okay? So turning into your heart is not hard, but it does take courage to do that. Now, when we deal with our hearts, there are a number of important points to keep in mind, because when we do that, when we do remember these points, they will certainly help with our efforts. Now, the first thing to understand that is very, very important is that your heart, apart from being aware and having a will of its own, is that it's very childlike in many respects. Okay? Your heart is naive, it's innocent, and it's rather helpless. So when you deal with it, always treat it like you would a small child. And by that I mean be patient with it, be loving with it, gentle, and nurturing with it. All right? Always treat it like a small child. Appreciate it, help it, and never ever get angry with it, and certainly never get forceful with it, never get defensive with it or impatient with it. The thing is, as you deal with your heart, sometimes you're going to find that some things are not shifting. You're going to find that sometimes you're not making progress in a particular area. And you may start getting a bit upset and angry because whatever this thing is, it's just getting in your way. It's blocking you. And you may be tempted to start imposing your will on your heart or trying to force it to do something. I would encourage you never ever to do that. All right? You can work with your heart always by stimulating it the right way. Just like you do with a child. There are good ways to deal with children and other ways which are not good. So give your heart what it needs and it will respond accordingly. And this is how you're going to get it to open up. The thing is as well, even if you do try and force your heart, you can't actually force your heart to do anything anyway. If you do get forceful, angry or impatient with your heart, the way it responds to that is it simply clams up and it withdraws, okay? It withdraws and it stops talking and it stops communicating and it just pulls back, okay? And when it does that, this can set you back significantly. So I can't harp on that enough. Be careful about the way you treat your heart. Don't ever treat your heart with contempt, because you have to remember as well, right? It is childlike, it is aware, it has a will of its own. It's a very complicated, I don't know what to call it, an organ. But you got to remember that it's taken a huge burden on your behalf. It has carried the pain that you have suffered in your life, and it's isolated you from that pain so that you can continue to live your life and to function in daily life. Okay, that is the sacrifice that your heart has borne, okay, on your behalf. So you got to remember that the heart deserves a really, really special place because it's done so much for us. It's suffered so much on our behalf, and we owe it a lot. We actually owe our hearts a huge debt for what they've done. And that is the truth of the matter, and we have to act accordingly. All right? Now, just like a child, you have to learn to keep an eye on your heart. You have to learn to nurture it, and that's something we're going to learn to do over time. And we have to learn to care for it. We have to learn to befriend our heart, to become friends with our heart, learn to communicate with our heart, and learn to keep in constant contact with our heart. We need to get to know our hearts, and we need to know and learn what's in our hearts so it can be brought out and dealt with. All right. In short, we need to develop a relationship with our hearts. And for some of us, this may be the first time we're going to do anything of the sort. Okay. And this is the part that does sound kind of crazy. Okay. But if you've paid attention to the first 3 teachings, or many more even before that, you'll see that this is actually quite scriptural. So when you tune into your heart and it starts speaking, you have to have an attitude of honor towards it. All right. So when it does speak, when it does communicate things to you, when you do figure things out, listen, take notes, and don't get angry or defensive. And never ever try to correct your heart, and never ever try to deny what it's saying or what it's feeling. Alright? Don't try and impose your will on it, as I said before, and never ever try to force it to do anything. If you don't treat your heart with honor and respect, and if you don't treat your heart like a child, it will back off. Okay? And it's going to make things far more difficult for you. If you treat your heart properly, you'll allow it to emerge so that it can speak freely, it can communicate freely, and it'll be more receptive to your efforts to connect with it. So acknowledge it, apologize to it for ignoring it for so long, thank it for carrying your pain, and tell it that you want to help it. Your heart needs to know, it needs to learn and understand that it will no longer be suppressed by you, and that you are willing to help it and give it a voice, that you are willing to listen to it. Now, I will be the first to admit how crazy that all sounds, and okay, there's very little I can do to defend that or explain it, but that's what I've learned, that's what I've seen, and that's what I've been shown. So I have come to accept it as truth, and I'll leave that for you guys to make that choice on your own. But as you progress with this heart teaching, and as you make efforts, you'll see what I mean. Alright? Of course, always take what I say to God as well. And I do pray to God that He will reveal to you anything that's out of whack or out of alignment. Alright? So it's also important to know that when your heart gets hurt, it will actually come to you for help. Okay? It'll come to you for help because it'll want your help, and it'll look for healing and restoration from you. So when you allow it to talk through a relationship that you develop with your heart, it will start talking. You will be able to recognize the problems and the issues, and you'll be able to flow with your heart quite quickly, quite easily, because what you are going to do is you're going to facilitate a connection between your heart and God. That is your role in all of this. You are a facilitator, and you're going to facilitate a connection between your heart and God so that God can come in and He can heal and restore. Alright? And this is going to be done as you expose the things in your heart. As God exposes it, you bring it out, you repent for it, and you make a way for God to come in and do what He needs to do. Okay. Now, what do I mean when I say a heart's going to talk to you? You're gonna have your heart speaking to you and talking to you. Okay, so maybe I shouldn't have used that word, because I don't actually mean that it will actually speak to you like I'm speaking to you right now. Instead, it's very much like when we hear from God, often as a stream of thoughts in our own voice. It's exactly the same when you talk to your heart. You will often have thoughts, and you'll experience a variety of emotions. You'll sense and you'll feel what it is thinking, what its opinion is on various matters, and how it's feeling. And it's usually quite clear. By the time you get to a point where you've become quite good at this, it is actually quite clear. Now, how do you know that it's your heart talking and not your mind? Well, when your heart speaks, it usually does so from a place that is very raw. I described a heart as being childlike, right? And it's when the heart speaks, it's very much the way a child speaks. It's usually got when something is said, there's usually strong emotion or opinion behind it. Sometimes it can be irrational. Sometimes it can be completely out of tune with what you think, what you really believe, or what you believe the truth is. All right. What can come out is pain, anger, swearing, cursing, blasphemy even. All right. Especially when the heart is angry or in a lot of pain. You can tell what comes out of the heart, because sometimes what comes out of the heart is highly inappropriate. The things that come up from the heart are sometimes things that you can't mention in front of other people. All right. Unless, of course, the other people understand what it is that's really going on. Okay? That's how you recognize when the heart is talking. When the mind speaks, on the other hand, it is often very refined, it is often very correct, and it's often quite emotionless. All right? When the heart speaks, it speaks as a child, full of emotion, possibly shocking, possibly unexpected stuff. And the last telltale about the heart when it speaks, when the heart speaks, it's often quite blunt, okay? It's in your face, blunt. All right? Now, yes, of course, the heart and the mind do speak, and they both speak through you. So, and by speaking to you, I mean you hear it as the same sort of voice. You sense it as the same voice. But what's different is that what you're hearing and what you're sensing and feeling, it comes from different sources, okay? So when you want to learn to listen to the heart, what I'm really saying is identifying the source of what you're hearing, what you're sensing, and what you're feeling. All right. And when you learn the different characteristics of the heart and mind, then that's when you start identifying the different sources of everything you're thinking, feeling, and experiencing. Okay. Another thing, just quickly, a difference between the heart and the mind. It's the tone. All right. The tone and the words and the emotions. If you pay attention to that, you'll see a massive difference between the mind and the heart, and the way they speak and communicate very differently. All right. It's the heart that often speaks through emotions. So if you feel angry, depressed, fearful, or even happy or excited, that's coming from your heart. Your heart is thinking or believing something, and the emotion you feel is how your heart is responding to those things. So when you feel bad, you have to dig into your heart, and you have to find out why it feels bad, okay? You're going to feel the emotion of something your heart believes, but we don't know what it believes. All we get to experience is the emotion. So that's why you have to tune into the heart. Tune into the heart and find out and ask it, what is it that your heart is believing that's causing these emotions, okay? And as you dig deep and you discover what it is believing, try not to suppress it and try not to push these things aside, even if they are blasphemous, even if they are blunt and horrible. Okay? Well, sometimes they very well may be. Children, as innocent and as naive as they may be, they are also capable of believing massive lies. Okay? It's the same thing as your heart. It can believe horribly wrong things, but never suppress it or push it aside. All right? Your heart is bringing this up to you so you can deal with it, and that is our responsibility in this process, to deal with it. A complaining heart and a whinging heart is a big indicator to you that your heart's trying to get your attention, and there is something in there that needs to be dealt with. All right? When you're angry, upset, depressed, whatever the case may be, that is your heart expressing itself. The solution is never to suppress the emotion or even try to escape it, but instead to turn inwardly, focus on the heart, and find out, ask, what is wrong? What is wrong? When you focus long enough, you'll find out what your heart is believing that's causing that bad emotion. All right? It does take courage sometimes, because we may not actually want to know what it is that the heart believes, you know. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, but spiritually that'll never get us very far. So be willing to listen to your heart. It may not be pretty, but it's only when you have the complete truth that you can begin to deal with it, that you can take it to God, and that you can begin to help your hurting heart. So if you want to try this out, I do suggest you practice it, all right? So I've just talked about identifying how your heart speaks and how the mind speaks and how to tell them apart. So I'm going to suggest a little exercise to practice this, all right? And you can practice it very simply by doing one thing, and that is by provoking your heart into speaking to you, okay? All you have to do to provoke your heart into speaking to you is to remember an event that was either painful or happy. Pick any event that had strong emotion attached to it, that still has strong emotion attached to it. And as you recall that event in as vivid detail as you want to, you turn inwardly and you pay attention to your heart, and you will very, very quickly sense and feel and hear what the heart is saying. Okay, that should be an awesome exercise. So I encourage you to try it out. You should be able to recognize the response from your heart, because it will be quite blunt and very honest. And the heart, really, when it does start speaking, it will speak. It'll be very forthright. It's not going to be bashful or shy. Okay. When you recall such memories, either bad or good, it will cause the heart to respond, because they typically cause the heart to emerge quite powerfully. All right. Strong memories cause the heart to emerge quite powerfully. And as you do this as well, of course, be aware that when you do tune into your heart like this and provoke it, especially with strong memories, sometimes the heart will want to release pain. Okay, I'm going to discuss this a little bit in more detail a bit later, but if this happens, remember that when pain comes up, it's actually a very good thing. We really, really do want our hearts to release the pain that they are carrying. So when the pain does come, let it flow, and let it flow for as long as you possibly can. Let it out as much as you can. Don't try and contain it. Don't try and control it, and certainly don't try and suppress it. Okay? When the pain comes, it's a blessing. Let it out. Let it out. Okay, so when it comes to cleansing your heart, what else do we do from here? Well, apart from the things that God may show you explicitly, all right, and this is what we covered in the last teaching, you can also let your heart show you what it's dealing with, okay? So in part 3, we partnered with God and we asked God to show us what's in our hearts. But the heart is also very well capable of showing you what it's dealing with and what it needs help with. Okay? So, how do you start? Where do you start with your heart? Now, the truth is that there are threads everywhere. You can just pick a thread anywhere and just start pulling on it and seeing what happens. Alright? Remember that everything you think, you feel, you say and do, it always goes back to the heart. It goes back to what you believe, it goes back to what you've experienced, and it goes back to what's contained in the heart. Okay? So for most of us, if not all of us, there's a lot of stuff to pick from. Okay? But here are some suggestions about where you can look and what you can start exploring. Every time you feel bad, or every time something's wrong, that is an opportunity to look at your heart and do a little bit of work with the heart. If you're acting irrationally or out of character, it's another opportunity to look at the heart. If you've been triggered into unusual or uncharacteristic behavior or speech, another thing to look at. We can even look at our thoughts, okay? Every time we think something, even as simple as a thought that is not biblically aligned, we can explore the origins of that thought. Where did that thought come out of? What is it that our heart has believed that has caused this thought to come out? And we can do that with behaviors as well. If you have any particularly bad behaviors or unusual behaviors or ungodly behaviors, whatever the case may be, you can dig into that, because behaviors as well are rooted in the beliefs of the heart. Sometimes we do things instinctively. These can all be explored, because behind everything, especially behind every bad thing, there is usually a belief that is rooted in a lie. Okay? You look at things such as fears, especially now, guys, especially now with what's happening in the world, what's happening in Victoria. Look at fears, right? We should not be walking in fear. So if you are fearful about anything at all, look at what the heart is believing. Is what the heart believing really, truly biblical, or is it something else? What is the root of your fears? What is the root of your doubt? Addictions, panic attacks, again rooted in fear. Any thoughts and opinions that might be askew. All right, behavior in ways that God did not design you to be. Look at your words as well. Our speech is very reflective of what's in our heart. So, anytime you may have spoken or said things that were not too good, again, bring that back into your mind and explore it, and try and trace that back to what is in your heart. All right, these things all matter. Sometimes you can even explore emotions, right? Sometimes we feel things, but we don't know where they're coming from or why. These things can be explored. A lot of us, I assume, will have a lot of obvious issues we want to look at, and that's okay. That's actually quite a good thing. And here's another good one. Very often, it's the people around you that can point out problems to you. problems in your behavior, your speech, your thinking, whatever, right? Very often things can be pointed out by other people, so this can be explored as well. Things that you are not necessarily noticing for yourself. All right, so I'm betting everyone knows of something they can get into straight away. If you know stuff about yourself right now that you want to get stuck into, by all means do it. But before you get started, let me offer this piece of advice, and it's a strong piece of advice. If you're going to engage with this heart healing work, then start slowly, all right? Take your time, be patient, start slowly. Start with small things in your life to test it out, to practice it, get to know it, to address any questions that may come up, and so that you can get comfortable with it. Get comfortable exposing it, exploring it, and get comfortable taking it to God, okay? Get comfortable dealing with the pain and the discomfort that comes with dealing these things. So here's the advice, right? Don't jump into the most traumatic memory you can remember, okay? Hoping to deal with the heavy stuff first so that you can have strong healing and deliverance. Okay, that's probably not a good way. As in most things, you do not want to jump in the deep end. Start small and then inch your way up. If anything, in everything you do, seek the advice of the Holy Spirit. Seek the leading and the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Let Him show you the way. If you do have a large selections of things to choose from, let Him lead you, right? Not only so that you can deal with things gradually and gently, but I've also come to learn that sometimes the order in which you address these issues is also important. Sometimes a layered approach is necessary because some wounds, some injuries, lies even are based on other wounds, injuries, and lies. So you need to dismantle them in some sort of order, and this again is where partnership with God is important. Okay? So start slowly. Start learning how to work with God. Start establishing your pace, and gradually inch towards the big things that you may possibly want to address. And as you do this, listen to your heart. Try and identify all the lies that your heart believes. Identify the accusations that your heart is accusing God of, and try and do so as best you can. Ask God to show you what's going on, what's happening behind the scenes. Ask God to show you what's behind every accusation and every lie. And this is when you take the time to pull yourself aside, to look internally and explore what's happening. This is not really a good process to rush. I mean, nothing bad's going to happen if you rush it, but you may just hamper the process somewhat. So take your time, be patient, and when you know what's happening and things have been exposed, bring it out into the light, bring it to God, and seek and ask for healing and restoration for it. The other thing as well is when we do get triggered by bad situations, by words, by other people, these things, of course, are usually quite unpleasant. So what we seek to do is put them behind us as soon as possible and forget about them. All right. This is suppression, okay? This is suppression of what's in the heart. This is suppression of issues that need resolution and they need to be dealt with. So, and this is something we do instinctively, right? I imagine I've been doing this my whole life. I imagine it's the same for all of us. But this is where things really need to change. So when you do get triggered by bad situations, people, words, events, whatever, what we really need to do is not so much turn away from it and suppress it, but we need to turn into it and explore it. As uncomfortable and unpleasant as it may be, it's sort of like going to the dentist, right? It's never fun, but it's always a worthwhile exercise. When these things happen, you turn into it and you explore what the role of the heart was during these times, during these situations. What was the heart doing? Why was it responding the way it did? What is it believing? Okay, what was your heart thinking? and we try and dig out the truth as best we can with God's help. We take responsibility for all of this stuff and we bring it out and we take it to God. So that is really, really very important. We need to change the way we handle the bad things in our lives. We don't put it behind us and forget about it. We turn into it and we explore it in all of its gory detail and we bring it out, because this is how we get healing for our hearts, and this is how the bad stuff in our hearts gets exposed. Okay? In doing all of this stuff, right, working with the heart, you can do this, and I do suggest that you do this intentionally and proactively. All right? You can take the initiative and you can go looking for problems. You can go make the time to address this stuff, and you can push forward as fast as you can, as fast as you like, or as fast as Holy Spirit would have you go. You don't have to be reactive, although you can choose that approach as well. But above all, learn to talk to the heart, learn to see how it feels, how it talks, and what it thinks. And as you explore your heart and how it feels, and you listen to it and you explore the lies, as I mentioned just a moment ago, it's not only lies that can come up, but pain as well. You may start experiencing grief and pain. And again, this is not something to be rejected or suppressed. It's not bad. Although it may feel bad and it may feel painful, it's not bad that it's coming up. It is good to allow that pain to flow, and it's good to allow that pain to come out. That pain is a poison in your system, and it affects your body and your soul. So let it out as much as you can when the opportunity arises. Allow it to be released. Give it space and give it freedom to come out and be released. It gives your heart freedom and it gives your heart relief, because it is your heart that's containing that pain. All right? And as your heart holds on to that pain, it can actually lead to other problems in your life, and it can even lead to health issues. All right? So when that pain comes out, it's a blessing. You actually want that. We should actually be seeking it out to get that pain released. For some people, it's actually a very hard thing to do. So count it as a blessing when it comes, and don't stop it. So when you do this, try and be in a place where you can release your pain freely, without distraction, I guess you'd want a little bit of privacy, but just roll with it. Roll with it so you can be set free in that moment. And here as well is an awesome tip that I've discovered. All right. If you want to see what's in your heart, very often, for most people, the best time to explore your heart and to talk to it and listen to it is first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up. All right. The first few minutes when you wake up in the morning, that is when your heart is most manifest. Okay. That is when your heart speaks the most clearly, because when you wake up in the morning, it's your heart that wakes up first, and then your mind slowly catches up. Okay. Usually the mind, like for me, the mind will catch up 15 minutes later after I've had a coffee. So in that 15-minute window, I actually have a chance to really see what's going on in my heart, because my mind is not there to control or suppress or censor everything. Okay. So when you first wake up in the morning, think about it, right? You may know now even. How are you first thing in the morning? You know, when you wake up, is it with a spring in your step and a song on your lips, or is it something else? I mentioned last time that every time I wake up, I always wake up depressed. But now I've discovered why that is, because I've been listening to the heart. I've been listening to my heart, and I've discovered a whole bunch of stuff. My heart's been talking to me all this time, but it's spoken to me most powerfully first thing in the morning, when I can hear it most clearly. So that is an awesome tip for you guys. See where you stand with that. How are you thinking and feeling first thing in the morning? Write them down. Keep that journal, as I spoke about last time, and examine these things. All right, they are usually very telling. and they can point you in the right direction. Now, okay, I hope you're still keeping up with me. There is a risk, as you've probably gathered by now, when it comes to looking into your heart, okay? When you look into your heart, it is a risk because it brings up a lot of pains. It can bring up a lot of thoughts and memories and opinions that you'd very much probably prefer to forget. It brings them up, and it brings them up into sharp focus, okay? When these things emerge, they will often bring pain with them, and we can get caught up in all of that very easily, especially if there's a lot of pain involved. And this sort of stuff can carry you away. It can really disrupt you a little bit. And I imagine this, of course, will be quite obvious to most people. When you look into your heart, you are going to be faced with pains and bad memories. But, you know, as I've said before many times, we face the pain ideally as best we can. We face and explore the lies, we bring it out, and we move forward. But there is a slightly bigger risk when we are dealing with issues in our hearts for which the heart blames God. Okay? So yes, we can deal with issues and pains, but sometimes when we suffer things after we became believers, the heart could very well blame God for having allowed bad things to happen to us. And when we suffer bad things as believers, the heart can very much turn away from God because it blames God for the suffering that we have experienced. Okay? And as we open up our hearts to explore these things, and the thoughts and opinions of our hearts come out, they can actually, here's the risk, right? They can take a hold of us, and they can push God away. The heart can push God away at the same time, okay? So here it is in a nutshell. When you bring things up in your heart, you look into your heart and things come out, and if your heart's blaming God, you're going to get caught up in all of this pain and all of this memory, and at the same time, your heart's going to push God away. You're not going to want anything to do with God, and that can leave you in a difficult place, because what we really need to be doing at that time is going to God for help. All right? It's challenging because a broken heart that blames God tries to protect itself even against God, okay, which is really a lie in itself. And it does that because it blames him for whatever reason. All right. Now, when we have such unresolved issues in our hearts, we manage to maintain our relationship with God by suppressing these issues and pushing them aside. Okay? We don't know how to have a relationship with God when at the same time our heart is accusing God of having let us down and betraying us. And that's very much a reality for many of us. So when eventually it all comes out, the question is, how are you going to respond to the emotional stuff that's coming out of your heart and that's blaming God? All right? That is the difficult part. There's the challenge. Are you going to be willing to give it to him and let him help you with it? Are you going to be willing to surrender that pain to God even though your heart is actively turning away from him? Will you accept the truth and allow him to help you through it? Or are you going to side with your heart and allow your heart to defend you against God? I hope that makes sense, okay? If you side with your heart against God, then you can't really go anywhere because God cannot help you, all right? If you side with your heart against God, you are going to get angry at God and you're going to separate yourself from him. You're going to push yourself away from him. What you have to do, what we have to do, is we have to learn to trust him, and we have to learn to open ourselves up to him and to let him lead us and help us and restore us, despite the fact that our hearts might be raging against him. Okay? You have to give him the benefit of the doubt. You have to remember as well that the heart is capable of believing tremendous lies. So as convincing as your heart may be when these issues and pains come up, it is most probably not right at all. Okay? Because it probably believes a few lies. if you do side with your heart in these things, then you are going to be left out. You're going to be left trying to figure things out with your mind. You're going to be left trying to figure out how you deal with this pain without God's help, which is really compromised. And trying to figure this out without God's help is really going to be quite ineffective, and it's actually going to be quite a waste of time. So I'm talking about this stuff. I'm hoping it makes sense. Even despite the fact that I knew this going in, let me tell you, just from my own experience, I got derailed for weeks at a time trying to do this. Okay, I knew this stuff going in, and I was derailed. When stuff came up in my heart, it separated me from God. Okay, and what actually happened with me is that I had to go through this repeatedly until eventually I came to a point where I could bring it to God. So I'm telling you, the guys, this now. It's probably something you'll go through, but don't be discouraged, because after a few attempts you're going to learn and see how this all works, and you will come to a point where you will be able to bring this all to God. So let me just be clear. I'm going to summarize it again. The challenge, the hardest part about all of this is having the strength to go to God in your pain, even while your heart is blaming Him for that pain and wants nothing to do with Him. Okay? What you have to realize, and I mean you, not your heart, is that there is a truth that is higher and more complete than the truth that your heart believes. And that is God's version of the truth. Okay? In order to get your stuff dealt with, in order to get your issues and pains dealt with, you have to accept that there is a higher version of the truth and be open to it. If you accept your heart's version of the truth, then nothing's going to happen. You're just going to remain in pain, you're going to be angry, and you're going to be unable to go to God. You will stay where you are, and you will continue to carry that pain and those lies. So that has to be overcome, and we have to learn to let Him in. All right, our pain tries to come between us and God, but we can make a conscious choice to step out of the grip of our hearts and into God, because nothing will happen until we do that. When you take these things to God, make sure you've first chosen to side with Him and that you're not sided against Him and angry at Him. Make sure that you have separated from the grip of your heart, and then move forward from there. The important thing about the lies and the accusations that you discover or that are revealed to you is how you handle them. All right? And as they come out, it's not an opportunity for your heart to come out against God and express its anger at Him for all the pain you've suffered. All right? This may happen, and don't be too hard on yourself if it does happen. I mean, I've been through it. But try not to talk to God out of your broken heart. All right? Although He's well capable of handling it, and He's probably expecting it, try not to talk to God out of a broken heart, because a broken heart can really say some really nasty things. All right? When we allow our broken hearts to rant and rave at God, it's not a good thing to do. All right? And in some cases, as we deal with our stuff, we may lack the control to keep things in check, to keep our hearts in check, but try to come around as best you can so that you can move forward. All right? We pray for our hearts and we repent on behalf of our hearts after we are firmly connected to God, and not while we are ensnared by the feelings, thoughts, and attitudes of the broken heart. That's because if you choose to go to God, it's at that place that you can operate as a son in faith and with the right attitude, and you can get the healing and the restoration that you seek. But if you speak out of your broken heart, on the other hand, your attitude will most likely be bad, and your heart will most likely be challenging God, accusing Him of a variety of things, and even expressing anger at Him. This is not going to achieve anything. It will actually be counterproductive. All right. Success is about realizing that whatever the heart believes, no matter how convincing, there is always a greater truth, and that is God's truth. how things really appear from his perspective. And by things, I mean your situation, what you've been through. What's important for your heart to learn and understand is how God sees what it's been through. And this is what's truly important. When we blame him for anything at all, we are believing the lies that the heart believes, and we are coming into agreement with them. And that just, all it does is it reinforces those lies, and it reinforces the power they have over us and in our lives. So we need to understand that we can never jump to conclusions, really, even though we may think we fully understand a situation, because we never have God's perspective unless he's revealed it to us. And we have to be open to that. Okay, so I'm sure by now you can see that compared to getting prayer ministry, this can be quite hard work. When we get prayer ministry, usually we just agree with the prayer minister and we sit and we receive. But this is far more challenging because this is stuff we have to do ourselves. And we need the courage to do that. We need the courage to turn into our hearts. And we need the courage to look into things that can be quite dark and painful. Now, I'm not trying to put anyone off from doing this, and I certainly don't want to scare anyone, but I am trying to be honest. Okay? I would never want to be accused of softening the truth in any way, or leading people into things that they don't expect to encounter. Alright? Getting into this can be daunting, but it is manageable. Again, that's why it's important we need to partner with God, because God's going to lead us down the best possible path. We have to uncover these things, and we have to bring it all to him, and we need to surrender it all to him. And we need to do so because this is usually the stuff that keeps us from him and blocks us from him. Alright? And it's not easy because we have to trust him, especially when the heart doesn't want to. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping it up. This is coming to the end of the 4th teaching about the heart. And I think, this is where we're going to end it. Let me just mention a couple of things before we tie it all up. If you do deal with something in your heart and it doesn't seem to go away, it doesn't seem to get addressed, it doesn't seem to shift in any way, it's usually either because you didn't take care of the root, or what you thought you were taking care of wasn't actually the root. It actually goes deeper, and there is something else there too. Okay? The roots of these things are very often hidden, so it may take a few goes to get something fully exposed and dug out. And when you do find these stubborn issues that don't seem to move, this is really where we need God's help. We need him to expose what's really going on. But when you do encounter these things, certainly don't give up. If anything, become more persistent and keep going until these things are addressed and dealt with. Alright? It does take courage, but it can most certainly be done. Alright? Now, in all of these 4 teachings, I don't have a name for it, but I refer to it as heart work. Having done it, I do feel different every morning, and it's quite amazing. It's very different, and I identify this as progress. Almost every day brings something new up, and it's something you can work on. Most times it's often unexpected, but let me suggest to you that when things pop up during your day, deal with it. Deal with it as it surfaces and as it presents to you. Now remember that last time we were talking about the various parts of the heart, and that different parts of the heart can take center stage. They can take the forefront of your consciousness. So when something presents, try and deal with it there and then, if you can, because you'll be dealing with a part of your heart that's actually present and at the forefront of your conscious. When these parts recede, it may actually become harder to deal with them. So yeah, definitely try and engage with God as things happen. This heart stuff, this heart teaching, I use it every time something's out of whack or something's wrong, or when something doesn't feel right, and I would also recommend the same to you, right? In any situation, when something pops out of your heart that's not quite right, be ready to catch those things, journal them, and deal with them. Whatever the case, try to learn to be in touch with your hearts all the time, and act on anything that may not be quite right. Pay attention always to what's happening in the heart, especially at times when you're under stress or pressure, because it's at that time that the heart comes out a bit stronger. And this is my personal belief, but I believe that as we do this heart teaching, as this process is undertaken, that we are gradually given a heart of flesh. All right? And it is something that's done or received gradually. The other important, very important point I need to make, the other teaching series I'm on at the moment is about rising up as a son. The enemy, of course, does not want you to arise, so he's going to use whatever hooks he has in your life, in your heart, to keep pulling you back down. So here's the thing, right? As you try and stand up as a son, things are going to get exposed in your heart. As these things get exposed, deal with them. Deal with them. And as you deal with them, you'll be able to rise back up, and you'll be able to stand up for longer periods of time, and you'll be able to stand stronger for longer periods of time. So as you try and stand up as a son, issues in your heart are going to get flushed out. As they get flushed out, deal with them. All right. I'm about to release another teaching very soon. This is all going one way. It's going in a very powerful direction. I hope you guys are keeping up. And yeah, guys, we are on a journey here to fix our hearts. We are on a journey to purify our hearts. And it's just like fixing a car, you know. If we're going to fix something, we have to be willing to get dirty. And for some people, it's easier to just not do that, or to just ignore and suppress the problem. And I hope that's not true of anyone that's listening today. I think I'm going to leave it there, guys. That's the end of the fourth teaching, and that's it, I think, for the whole heart teaching. Be blessed, and yeah, I hope to hear from anyone who has any questions or wants to talk about this at all. All right.